In the air of Chicago, a city that never truly sleeps, but is often shrouded in nightly nightmares, a distinct, piercing scent lingered. It was the smell of asphalt baked by the summer sun, the chill of a wet winter, and sadly, the ever-present odor of fear. It had permeated the streets, seeped into apartments, and settled permanently in the most hidden corners of people's souls. This scent was intrinsically linked to the story of the Gangster Disciples, an organization that, beginning as scattered street gangs, transformed into a powerful, meticulously structured empire that held entire neighborhoods hostage. Today, we journey into the heart of this grim history, into a city where dreams often shatter against harsh reality, and faint hope frequently gives way to all-consuming despair. Our narrative is not merely a chronicle of crimes. It is a profound exploration of how social inequality, suffocating lack of opportunity, and an insatiable thirst for power can birth a true monster. It is a story of people who desperately tried to resist, of innocent victims whose lives were ruthlessly destroyed, and of the few who, risking everything, fought to restore justice. Chicago, during the 60s, an era of sweeping change, a time of struggle for civil rights, but simultaneously a period of immense tension, sharp racial conflicts, and profound economic decline in certain parts of the city. In such harsh conditions, where the law often seemed distant and unjust, and the streets became the sole battlefield for survival, the first seeds of a future empire began to sprout. It was then, on the southern side of the city, in a district infamously known as the Nation of Outlaws, that young men started to unite. They were often from disadvantaged families, deprived of paternal care and any hope for a better future. The genesis of the Gangster Disciples was not a random surge. It was a carefully considered, albeit brutal, process. The core idea was to create a united front, a formidable force capable not only of confronting other gangs, but also, as they themselves claimed, of protecting their members from police arbitrariness and ingrained social injustices. The leaders, undoubtedly, were the most charismatic, the most ruthless, and the most cunning. One such man was Larry Hoover, a figure whose name became synonymous with absolute power and terrifying authority. Hoover, possessing a sharp mind and an unyielding will, managed to transform initial chaos into a semblance of order, and scattered groups into a disciplined, stringent, hierarchical organization. The Gangster Disciples represented something more than just a gang. It was a paramilitary structure with a clear chain of command, its own unwritten rules, and even a unique style of dress and symbolism that reflected their inner world and aspirations. They favored shades of blue, and this wasn't merely a fashion statement, but a distinct mark of affiliation, an unshakable symbol of their unity and hidden strength. Their influence was felt everywhere, extending far beyond the narrow streets they called their domain. Their hands were deep in shadow dealings. They dictated the terms of the drug trade, thrived on racketeering, did not shy away from robberies, and alas, murder. All their power was built on the chilling fear they skillfully sowed and the unquestioning loyalty they demanded from everyone who fell within their orbit. In the neighborhoods ruled by the Gangster Disciples, a peculiar oppressive atmosphere prevailed. For the members of the gang itself, it was a place where they felt their power, where they found protection and tasted a semblance of order. But for ordinary residents, caught in the grip of this influence, every day was saturated with fear. Schoolyards, shop windows, even ordinary streets. Everything could instantly transform into a battlefield, an arena for brutal showdowns, where innocent people became hostages caught between the grinding gears of merciless power. The younger generation was instilled with the belief that bearing the title of disciple was the greatest honor, a direct path to gaining strength and deserved respect. But behind this outward veneer of power and control lay a profound tragedy, relentlessly shattering lives and breaking destinies. It was within this oppressive, grim atmosphere that the very organization began to form, gathering strength and developing. Hawk, incarcerated, continued to direct his people, constructing a highly intricate, multi-layered network. He skillfully leveraged his prison connections, extending his authority and solidifying his influence. The Gangster Disciples transformed into a kind of corporation of evil, where each link, each gang member, performed a precisely defined function, bringing substantial profit to their leaders. Yet, any empire built on the foundation of violence and pervasive fear is destined to eventually face resistance. In this instance, it was not a fleeting encounter, but a long, grueling, ceaseless struggle. Law enforcement officers, operating at both federal and local levels, tirelessly attempted to confront this sinister phenomenon. However, this was a task of extraordinary complexity. The gang had become so deeply and firmly woven into the social fabric of certain neighborhoods that it sometimes seemed an inseparable part of life itself in those places. Witnesses were paralyzed by fear and refused to speak. Victims chose silence, and many residents simply tried to survive, avoiding any attention directed their way. Federal law enforcement agencies, specifically the Federal Bureau of Investigation, took a pivotal role in confronting the Gangster Disciples gang, working in conjunction with the prosecutor's office. They initiated extensive investigations aimed at dismantling the gang's structure from within. A wide array of methods were employed, from deep cover agent infiltration to meticulous interception of communications. However, the most potent weapon in their arsenal proved to be the RACO Act, the Racketeer-Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. This legislation allowed for the prosecution of not just individual gang members, but the entire organization as a unified criminal entity, thereby opening vast avenues for asset forfeiture and the complete demolition of their financial foundation. One of the most significant turning points in this protracted confrontation was the case against Larry Hoover himself. His arrest and the subsequent trial garnered immense public attention. For many, this represented a symbolic chance to witness the end of this dark, frightening era. Yet, even from behind bars, Hoover continued to exert considerable influence. His words remained law for his devoted followers, and his arrest, alas, by no means signified his complete defeat. It was merely a fleeting pause in his endless, cunning game. It is important to understand that the Gangster Disciples are not simply a collection of people perpetuating lawlessness. Rather, they represent an entire phenomenon, born from the entanglement of difficult social and economic realities. Many who joined their ranks grew up amidst extreme poverty, in areas with meager infrastructure and severely limited access to decent education and basic medical care. For most of them, joining the gang represented the only available path to gaining some form of power, control, and, as they believed, a measure of security. It was a peculiar reverse social elevator, where brute force and criminal activity opened a door to another world, albeit one that was immeasurably dangerous. No less significant is the psychological subtext of this entire story. Try to imagine a young person growing up in an environment where violence has become commonplace, where brute force is the established law, a place where true respect is earned through the force of one's fists, not the depth of one's knowledge. In such harsh conditions, where a gang leader's authority often carries far more weight than the law itself, moral compasses blur, making it tempting to believe that only brute force truly matters. For many, the Gangster Disciples became the very family they desperately lacked, filling the void left by absent homes and support. Yet, others viewed the gang's activities as pure evil, ruthlessly destroying their lives and the lives of those dearest to them. They attempted to resist, seeking aid from law enforcement, but frequently encountered a wall of widespread indifference or the inability of the state apparatus to cope with the scale of this all-consuming problem. Fear, burning shame, an unbearable sense of hopelessness. These dark companions haunted numerous victims. To openly declare they were being harassed by the gang meant signing their own death warrant, inviting even greater trouble and more lethal danger. Years passed, and despite the relentless efforts of law enforcement, the Gangster Disciples continued to hold their ground as one of Chicago's most powerful street gangs. Their methods grew increasingly cunning, and their spheres of influence became ever more extensive and deeply entrenched. They reigned supreme over drug trafficking, skillfully laundered criminal proceeds, their greedy hands reaching for new and ever more profitable sources. Yet, even the internal structure of this gang was not free from sharp internal conflicts and contradictions. Power struggles, betrayals, murders, all of this was an inherent part of their internal, poisoned, feuding lives. And so, despite their outward formidable might, internal cracks, like poisonous roots, permeated their unity, relentlessly weakening it. But the story of the Gangster Disciples is not just a grim tale of violence and crime. It is, above all, a testament to how society, faced with deep social problems that give rise to such phenomena, tries to find solutions. The gang's activities sparked a broad public discussion, touching upon the most acute questions. What are the true causes of crime? What is the role of the police in combating it? And how important is the need to implement social programs in disadvantaged areas, where these dark sides of life often take root? As law enforcement agencies managed to arrest and convict key figures of the gang, its influence, like a dying flame, gradually weakened. There were periods when it seemed the Gangster Disciples were about to be completely destroyed, wiped off the face of the earth. But each time they found the strength to recover, adapt, and rebuild, like the eternal hydra of the criminal world, whose heads grew with astonishing speed, much faster than they could be cut off. And even despite all efforts undertaken, there still remain questions to which there are no clear, comforting answers. Could the emergence of such a formidable organization have been prevented? How precisely should society and the state respond to these kinds of challenges? And, most importantly, how can we ensure that the new generation does not fall prey to the same social problems that gave birth to the Gangster Disciples? This story serves as a stark reminder that crime does not arise from nothing. It grows from soil nurtured by social injustice, economic inequality, and an all-consuming lack of hope. Combating it is not solely the prerogative of the police and the servants of justice, but a universal undertaking, the responsibility of each one of us. The Gangster Disciples are not merely another chapter in the grim chronicle of Chicago's criminality. They represent a lesson we are bound to learn to prevent the repetition of these tragic mistakes. And as long as chasms yawn within society, unfilled by opportunity and fairness, there will always be those who attempt to exploit these abysses for their own selfish gain, crafting stories that today we recall with